Hello and welcome to today's video. This time we'll be taking a look at a couple of DC compact comics. Now these are small format graphic novels which represent fantastic value for money, and I think you're going to love them. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay then, so the two graphics I've got are Watchmen and All-Star Superman, and I think we'll have a look at Watchmen first of all because, well, let's be honest, it is absolutely iconic, this one, and I remember buying Watchmen. I bought the 12-issue maxi series, I think they used to call them back in the day. I think that was in 1986, and I very much remember buying the graphic novel, and I've actually brought my original graphic novel from 1987 along with me today to show a comparison of sizes, but also to tell you a fairly interesting story. When this one was published, I said back in 1987, there wasn't a lot of graphic novels around. There was this, and there was Dark Knight Returns were the biggies, and this is the first print there. It's got the number 1 there, and it was 1987. So I was in London. I was a young guy, and I was queuing up to pay for this with a few other magazines and comics and that. And the chap in front of me, not that I realised it at the time, was actually Alan Moore. The person was served in front of me and said, "Oh yeah, see you next week, Alan." And I looked up, and lo and behold, it was the hairy yeti that he was at the time, Alan Moore. There he was. He was there picking up his comics. Now this is in Forbidden Planet in Denmark Street, and they had another shop nearby. They had two branches of Forbidden Planet before they went to Tottenham Court Road, and before they were where they are today. But I always remember that when I first picked up Watchmen. I wish I'd said, "Oh yeah, Alan, come and sign this for me," but look at the state of it. It's a book that I've read and reread many times, and I think Watchmen is one of those books that I go back to about once every 3 years. It's a bit like From Hell, which is another Alan Moore one, which I recommend. And this is just my original one, and I've kept it ever since it was published, and I absolutely love it. It's just a fantastic graphic novel. I do actually like the Zack Snyder film as well. I think that's really underrated. I know a lot of people do not like it, but I think he did a great job. So there you go. So that's my little Watchmen story. But on to the point of this video, which is these DC compact comics. So this has been republished in this sort of more compact format. If you compare it to a regular sized graphic novel, you can see it's a little bit shorter. It's not as big as it's a bit bigger than a B format paperback, slightly, but much bigger than an A format. So it gives you a bit of an idea. It's not as wide. But I mean, this has got 12 very thick comics, because if you remember with Watchmen, at the start of each episode or each part, you'd have this it'd basically be almost like a mock newspaper story, wouldn't it? And it would tell all sorts of stuff. I mean, just so in depth. And that would be at the start of each issue before it went into the regular comic. And you've got all of that. So all 12 issues for $9.99 in the States and £8.99 from Amazon UK. Now you've got to say that represents fantastic value for money. I mean, just look how thick it is. I would liken it more to a manga book than almost like your traditional sort of graphic novel. But my biggest concern was because Alan Moore being Alan Moore, a lot of his stuff is quite wordy. So if you can imagine looking at this page here, that to me doesn't seem too small. It's only a little bit smaller than if you were reading like a regular novel. Don't get me wrong, it is small, but it's not too small. And if we look at some of the word, that's like a typical Alan Moore page, lots and lots of dialogue. Is that too small? Even for my eyes, I think that's okay. That's quite readable, particularly for the size of the book. You can open it up. It is quite tightly bound here, but it's all there. I think it's still absolutely fine. That's totally readable to me, but you do really have to pull back on it to get the text, which is right in the gutter there. So sort of bear that in mind. But this was not, I would say, an easy book to republish in this size, because there was a lot of considerations made. But I don't think they've made any compromises. It is an exact replica of this original graphic novel from almost 40 years ago now. So I don't think it's too small. Now, I have heard other criticisms, and perhaps this might be a little bit more evident when we look at the Superman book, that some of the actual colouring on this seems a little bit like washed out. Now, the paper, when you think how many pages are in here, the paper is not super glossy. It's not like a DC Finest, which I've been reviewing on the channel recently. It's like a matte finish, and I think that is why the actual colouring on this seems a little bit more, perhaps not washed out, but perhaps a little bit more, how can you describe it, a little bit more sort of pastel-y than perhaps you might have it if the pages were really glossy, and which would make the colouring pop. If we compare it to the original one, I don't think there's that much difference colouring wise. Bearing in mind this is a 40-year-old graphic novel, but it is, you can clearly see that is more vibrant than that. I think that is quite sort of obvious there. But it doesn't take my enjoyment away from it one little bit. You know, I'm still not thinking, oh, I wish that was a bit more, a bit brighter. I'm just not thinking that. I think it's absolutely fine as is. But it's something to bear in mind. And we'll sort of look at that subject again when we have a look at the All-Star Superman volume. But for in the hand, I mean, it really is something that you can have in the hand. So I've been racking my brains and thinking, well, what sort of person would want to have this? So it would probably be somebody who perhaps has never read Watchmen. They might have seen the film, and they maybe want to dip their toe into a graphic novel. Now, there's a dozen of these DC Compact comics, and they've been around for about 6 months. As far as I know, they haven't announced any new volumes yet, but I'm sure they will come. Because there's lots of series which are like 10, 12 parts, which potentially would work very, very well in this format. But if you had a friend, say, who'd never read Watchmen, I think for the price point, what a great gift this would be. Say, look, I really want you to try Watchmen. It's just one of the greatest graphic novels and superhero stories ever told. I think you're going to love it. Forget if you've seen the movie, forget that. Just read this through because it's just so great. And just see how they get on. And I think there's a lot in here. I mean, there really, really is. I think also it may be suitable for, say, a traveller. So say you're going on holiday, you might want to pick up, say, 2 or 3 compact comics and stick them in your luggage. I'd feel very comfortable reading this on a plane or on the train or on a bus, because it's not quite as bold and in your face as reading a big normal-sized graphic novel in public. This just looks like you're reading, like a manga or something like that. Not that we have anything to be embarrassed about by reading comics in public. I love doing it. The more outrageous, the better, in actual fact. I love to get heads turning, but that's just me. But yeah, I think that's the sort of person who these might be aimed at. And as I said, there's only a dozen so far, but there are some very, very good ones. In fact, they do actually have some of them on the back. So we've got the Batman Hush limited series with Jim Lee and Jeff Lowe. Wonder Woman Earth 1. Now, I've not read that one, but once again, it's a Grant Morrison title. Joker, Brian Azzarello, who I really, really like. I like his writing. American Vampire, Book 1. Now, I'm quite interested to see this because it is Book 1, so that would imply that they're willing to be doing future sort of volumes. Now, we've got All-Star Superman to look at in a minute. Now, I've heard Batman the Court of Owls saga is very, very good, but it's one I've not actually read. So that's definitely on my hit list. And so is this one, which is Far Sector, which is a Green Lantern related one, which is also highly recommended, apparently. So I will keep a little eye out for those ones. And then, of course, it pushes V for Vendetta, which is also Alan Moore, and a couple other books as well. Killing Joke, which is one of his most famous. His run on Swamp Thing is just fantastic. And they pulled together all his Superman stuff, which he did just before Swamp Thing, which the Alan Moore Superman run, it's just bits and pieces here or there, is also very, very good. So there you are. So that's Watchmen. Now, the other one we've got, it's not quite as big, but it's still 12 issues of the original All-Star Superman comic. And that's, it is All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. Now, Frank Quitely had done quite a bit of work for Marvel, but he'd worked with Grant Morrison well, loads in fact. I first came across his artwork when he, once with Grant Morrison, when he did New X-Men. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Grant Morrison New X-Men run with his artwork. It is just fantastic. I forget exactly how many issues, but I think it's maybe the best part of 3 years worth of New X-Men, maybe a little bit longer, and I highly recommend that. But this is, once again, like Watchmen, 12 issues of a comic, but because it came much, much later than Watchmen, about 30 years later in actual fact, the actual comics that they're reprinting aren't anything like as wordy, as you can see. Now, first of all, we'll address the issue of the slightly faded look. So once again, it's got the matte sort of paper quality, but because I haven't got the original comics or another graphic novel with this to compare to, for me, this just looks absolutely fine. It's not like the colours are really washed out. They do sort of, once again, have that pastel-y sort of feel to them, but at the same time, you know, the colours are absolutely there. They're vivid enough for me. I mean, just how bright do you want them? Let's be honest. I mean, that looks fine to me, you know. And once again, it's a great, great story, this one, if you've never read it. It was a 12-part, what do they call them, maxi series, a 12-part limited series. And I've sort of been having a little think about what other series that were like 12 parts that potentially could be put into this compact comic form, because they're doing the DC Finest, and those are 550 pages, in some cases 600, where they're reprinting epic runs of titles complete. These are much more targeted. It's like they could just go back through their existing graphic novel back catalogue and choose some books to bring to this format, and I don't think they go far wrong. There's a Catwoman one there listed. They've got Batman Hush, which was a very, very good title. Harley Quinn, and the Gotham City Sirens is another one coming. And those are the other ones we've seen there. Obviously, Grant Morrison did quite a bit for DC, and his Doom Patrol run, one of his early attempts, and there's a few other Superman books. So, I mean, there really is so much. I mean, I was sort of thinking, like, really historical, like they could do, like, do you remember that Camelot series that Brian Bolland did? That was a 12-issue series. They could do something like that, or they could pull together some of the other mini-series, like the Legends series 1 to 6, plus some of the spin-offs. I mean, it really is endless, but, you know, you can see, once again, this is a really great, I think you'd zoom through this one twice the speed as you would Watchmen, but I don't think there's, I mean, everything about this is so readable. You're not going to have any issues at all with that. And it is one of the greatest Superman stories that have been written. There are many. It's nice that they do include the covers as well. So they've got the actual individual comic covers. I'm glad that they're included. But once again, this is what, about 250 pages? Watchmen's, you know, probably 300 plus. But the mind boggles, really, just what they could come up with. And I think DC, with these compact comics and their DC Finest, I think they're really, really hitting the ball out of the park. And I think other publishers, particularly Marvel, need to, you know, buck up and take notice, because this is these compact comics, I mean, they're akin to, like, superhero paperbacks I read when I first read comics back in the 1970s. Back then, we didn't have access to comic shops, and what was being printed in the UK was often in black and white. It wasn't exciting. These are full colour, and DC have got such a rich back catalogue. They can just pull on the very cream of the crop and bring them out in these very inexpensive editions. As I said, $8.99 in the UK, $9.99 in America. You really, really cannot go wrong at that price. So I would say, get your favourite books for yourself. Pick a couple up to take on holiday. I certainly will be taking both of these next time I go away. But also, I'm going to bear, particularly Watchmen, as the sort of thing to bear in mind as a present for someone who you may think, oh, they probably like graphic novels. I might pick up a copy and gift it to someone. And that one's definitely on that particular list. So there you go. So I hope you enjoyed that little look at the DC Compact Comics. Now, don't forget, I have also got another series which I've started covering the DC Finest graphic novels, and I'll try and keep an eye on both series on a pretty much monthly basis going forward. If you've enjoyed today's video, do please give it that thumbs up. Do please hit the subscribe button if you've not already for regular vintage comic content, and I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.